I'm here, people. I know y'all be putting out APBs for me. Okay. Oh, my kids. Book. Just came down the stairs. All right, beautiful people. I know y'all be putting out APBs for me. I'm here. One second, let me grab my book. But Swabble, Trina, hey guys, Alicia, y'all, everybody else is here. Hold on one sec. Eyes here, hold on. Peace and blessings. Let me tell you, here's what I don't need to be doing in the morning. Responding to people. Because I like to get thorough answers and references. And then, I lose track of time. I'm like, oh, shoot. So I'm going to have to stop that. So the time passes by so fast. When I'm responding to people, I'm like, oh, my gosh, let me get moving. All right, y'all. I'm sorry. Shayla, that's Wabble. Let me get YouTube online. I'm debating if I want to say something about one particular thing this morning. I really am. This is, well, I was actually responding to somebody about this. Hold on. I'm bringing YouTube on. Hold it. It's probably. Alicia, why you say hold it? Because you want to hear it first, or you really think I should hold it? Even though you don't know what I'm about to say. Or you saying hold it like hold on so you can listen. Let me know. Because I'm really debating about this. Tell me what you mean by hold it, Alicia. Christy, hey girl, hey. Alicia, I'm waiting for your answer. I am waiting for your answer before I move forward. That's the first thing that came to mind. Hold it like don't say anything yet. That's the first thing that came to mind. Hold it like don't say it yet, Alicia. That's still kind of vague to me. Be very, I hear what you're saying. Are you saying hold it like Pam? No, don't say it. You say it right. Okay, that's what I need. Don't say it yet. Okay. All right. Because I did for a moment, it's like, not yet. But I'm just like, I need to say something. Okay. Because I think it's something that's, people will see. But I did respond to the one person about it. I'm like, look, you got to be paying attention to this. Yeah. What do y'all say? See, that's the thing, Tiffany. Y'all didn't say yes or no. But I did get the inkling. That's why I paused and said, wait a minute, I don't know if I should. That's why I did that. Y'all didn't necessarily say, Pam, don't say it. But I did get the inkling. That's why I stopped myself. Ooh, I don't know if I should say this. And then Alicia said, don't say it. I trust what Alicia said. Not that I don't trust what any of you say, but me and Alicia talk a lot about spiritual things, going back and forth and sharing. And sometimes she be like, wait, Pam, hold on a second. Just hear me out. Listen to this. So, okay, I'm gonna hold it, but I am gonna, Alicia, I'm gonna call you, tell you what I'm talking about, because it's crazy. It's crazy, and I'll just say this. I think it's a lot of people that's talking about this, but it's really about to have a lot of people upset. Like people, it's like the same thing we was talking about with Jonah yesterday. Remember how Jonah, he didn't go to Nineveh. He didn't want to go to Nineveh because he knew if he gave the message that Yahuah truly indeed give to him, that he said that if it didn't happen, he would be considered a false prophet. Not that because I haven't said anything, but I can clearly see what's happening. And he said there are literally people who are hanging on the words of some prophets that don't matter if they prophecies come to pass or not. And even if they do, we also know that Yahuah will allow those things to happen. They will allow a lot of what you say to come to pass, especially if there are people that are looking up to you more than what they are to Yahuah. I'm like, Father, this is going to turn a lot of people away. A lot of people are going to be kind of pissed about this, and I'm like, oh, and it's a few people, right? And you know how you get this. You know how sometimes you believe something or want to believe something so bad that you start dreaming about it? It's like the same thing. And then you got different people who also begin to believe this same thing with you. And then you got this whole, it's like you can personally cause different dreams to happen because you want something so bad. I think it's called groupthink or whatever. And every time I see it, I'm just like, oh my gosh, because I used to be taken by it. And I'm just like, wait a minute. I'm like, Father, hold on. This sounds really convincing, and it got my emotions all over the place. And that was the one thing I was like, and I'm not going to say it, but I'm just, so you can look at different things when you hear stuff. When something tends to have your emotions all over the place, you need to pinpoint and see why. Is it because of fear? Is it fear because you don't know? Or is it fear that possibly, what if you do know, there wouldn't be any fear there unless you know something, and you know for sure, and you're in absolute rebellion to this truth that you've understood. And then I can see where fear might come in, but then you would be emboldened because now you're purposely doing what you know not to do, right? But people who tend to get all emotional, and it's like oh my gosh, tell me what to do. It's like you literally at this point cannot think for yourself. There's a problem with that. There's a major problem with that. And I take issue with people who do that, some people, they seem like they're really nice people. But to have people emotions all over the place and then to come defend what you said and throw Yahuah's name on it, I was just like, yeah, you know what? I use the standard of the prophets that we read in the Old Testament. I was like, yeah, we don't see this in the character of any of them. Now, I do see this character in some of the rogue ones, like Balaam, but Yahuah's prophets, they ain't going out here to defend any kind of word or dream. They just stay. Do you see mailmen out here reading your mail? That's what the prophets are. They're like mailmen. They just gonna hand you. There you go. I ain't even open it. You go ahead, because that's for you. I'm just here to deliver it. And they're delivering. They're not coming back, you did get that. And this is because they don't know, right? And even if Yahuah does let them see something, they just don't do that, unless Yahuah authorizes them. But they're not defending what they said Yahuah told them. They just give it and go on about their business. They on to the next thing. That's what prophets do, right? You might be in trouble if you're listening to somebody that's constantly defending their prophecies on what they said Yahuah said to them, or the dreams that they said Yahuah gave to them, right? So just be on the lookout for that. Now, I said all that without telling you exactly what it was, because that's just a general good principle and all. So I gave you the principle without giving you the actual issue, right? Okay, so look at it that way. That's the way to say it, because that'll keep people's, at least you won't know the people, right? Because there's a few of them. Okay, y'all, so happy Friday. Happy Friday, Aliyah, Mom, Belinda Brown, Shalom, Shalom. Oh, Nathaniel. At least, y'all, we know you're here. I said, hey to Christy, Shayla, Trina, Levon, greetings, Trina, hey, girl, hey. Okay, and a few other people. All right, y'all. So today we are reading 2 Samuel 7, 8, and 9, and then we pick up with the Legends of the Jews on page 458. It is Friday, April the 2nd, 2021. Day 118 of year 3 of reading through the books of the law and the prophets, and of the 3-year consecutive day count, day 787. So let's do the Shema real quick, which is found on Deuteronomy chapter 6. Hear, therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may increase mightily, as Yahuah, the God of our fathers, has promised us, in the land that flows with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, Yahuah, our God, He is one God, and you shall love Yahuah your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart, and you shall teach them diligently unto your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them upon the posts of your house and on your gates. And Yahuah commanded us to do all these statutes, to fear Yahuah our God for our good always, that He might preserve us alive as it is at this day. And it shall be our righteousness if we observe to do all these commandments before Yahuah our God, as He has commanded us. Beautiful people, so let's go ahead and hop over here to 2 Samuel. Oh, I didn't mean to put that down. Wrong one. Sorry. I'll put it back up there. All right, y'all. Yahuah's covenant promise to David. I'm sorry, y'all. I had to bring it back up. I clicked the wrong button. Okay. When King David was settled in his palace, and Yahuah had given him rest from all the surrounding enemies, the king summoned Nathan the prophet. Look, David said, I'm living in a beautiful cedar palace, but the ark of Yahuah is out there in a tent. Nathan replied to the king, go ahead and do whatever you have in mind, for Yahuah is with you. But that same night, Yahuah said to Nathan, go and tell my servant David, this is what Yahuah has declared. Are you the one to build a house for me to live in? I have never lived in a house. From the day I brought the Israelites out of Egypt until this very day, I have always moved from one place to another with a tent and a tabernacle as my dwelling. Yet no matter where I have gone with the Israelites, I have never once complained to Israel's tribal leaders, the shepherds of my people Israel. I have never asked them, why haven't you built a beautiful cedar house? Why haven't you built me a beautiful cedar house? Now go and say to my servant David, this is what Yahuah, the God of heaven's armies, has declared. I took you from tending sheep in the pasture and selected you to be the leader of my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone, and I have destroyed all your enemies before your eyes. Now I will make your name as famous as anyone who has ever lived on the earth. And I will provide a homeland for my people Israel, planting them in a secure place where they will never be disturbed. Evil nations won't oppress them as they've done in the past, starting from the time I appointed judges to rule my people Israel, and I will give you rest from all your enemies. Furthermore, Yahuah declares that He will make a house for you, a dynasty of kings. For when you die and are buried with your ancestors, I will raise up one of your descendants, your own offspring, and I will make his kingdom strong. He is the one who builds a house, a temple for my name, and I will secure his royal throne forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. If he sins, I will correct and discipline him with a rod, like any father would do. But my favor will not be taken from him as I took it from Saul, whom I removed from your sight. Your house and your kingdom will continue before me for all time, and your throne will be secured forever." So Nathan went back to David and told him everything Yahuah had said in this vision. Then King David went in and sat before Yahuah and prayed, "Who am I, O sovereign Lord, and what is my family, that you have brought me this far? And now, sovereign Lord, in addition to everything else, you speak of giving your servant a lasting dynasty. Do you deal with everyone this way, O sovereign Lord? What more can I say to you? You know what your servant is really like. Sovereign Lord, because of your promise and according to your will, you have done all these great things and have made them known to your servant. How great are you, O sovereign Lord? There is none like you. We have never even heard of another God like you. What other nation on earth is like your people Israel? What other nation, O Yah, have you redeemed from slavery to be your own people? You have made a great name for yourself when you redeemed your people from Egypt. You performed awesome miracles and drove out the nations and gods that stood in their way. You made Israel your very own people forever, and you, O Lord, became their God. And now, O Yahuah, I am your servant. Do as you have promised concerning me and my family. Confirm it as a promise that will last forever, and may your name be honored forever, so that everyone will say, Yahuah, the Lord of heaven's armies, is God over Israel. And may the house of your servant David continue before you forever. O Lord of heaven's armies, God of Israel, I have been bold enough to pray this prayer to you because you have revealed all this to your servant, saying, I will build a house for you, a dynasty of kings. For you are God, O sovereign Lord. Your words are truth, and you have promised these good things to your servant. And now may it please you to bless the house of your servant, so that it may continue forever before you. For you have spoken, and when you grant a blessing to your servant, O sovereign Lord, it is an eternal blessing. 2 Samuel chapter 8. After this, David defeated and subdued the Philistines by conquering Gath, their largest town. David also conquered the land of Moab. He made the people lie down on the ground in a row, and he measured them off in groups with a length of rope. He measured off 2 groups to be executed for every 1 group to be spared. The Moabites who were spared became David's subjects and paid him tribute money. David also destroyed the forces of Hadadezer, the son of Rehob, the king of Zobah, when Hadadezer marched out to strengthen his control along the Euphrates River. David captured 1,000 chariots, 7,000 charioteers, and 20,000 foot soldiers. He crippled all the chariot horses except enough for 100 chariots. When Arameans from Damascus arrived to help King Hadadezer, David killed 22,000 of them. Then he placed several army garrisons in Damascus, the Aramean capital, and the Arameans became David's subjects and paid him tribute money. So Yahuah made David victorious wherever he went. David brought the gold shields of Hadadezer's office to Jerusalem, along with a large amount of bronze from Hadadezer's towns of Tebah and Berothai. When King Toi of Hamath heard that David had destroyed the entire army of Hadadezer, he sent his son Joram to congratulate King David for his successful campaign. Hadadezer and Toi had been enemies and were often at war. Joram presented David with many gifts of silver, gold, and bronze. King David dedicated all these gifts to Yahuah, as he did with the silver and gold from the other nations he had defeated, from Edom, Moab, Ammon, Philistia, and Amalek, and from Hadadezer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah. So David became even more famous when he returned from destroying 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. He placed army garrisons throughout Edom, and all the Edomites became David's subjects. In fact, Yahuah made David victorious wherever he went. So David reigned over all Israel and did what was just and right for all his people. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was commander of the army. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was the royal historian. Zadok, son of Ahitub, and Ahimelech, son of Abithar, were the priests. Sariah was the court secretary. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was the captain of the king's bodyguard. And kings and David's sons served as priestly leaders. Getting my tongue tied. I had to slow down. Okay, last chapter for today, y'all. 2 Samuel chapter 9. Sun is blocking me out again. I'm sorry, y'all. I be forget. Okay, I'm sorry. David's kindness to Mephibosheth. One day, and remember, Mephibosheth is the one who, when they were fleeing, his nurse dropped him. He was 5 years old, dropped him, and he became crippled from that time on. Okay. One day, David asked, "Is anyone in Saul's family still alive? Anyone to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" He summoned a man named Ziba, who had been one of Saul's servants. "Are you Ziba?" the king asked. "Yes, sir, I am," Ziba replied. The king then asked him, "Is anyone still alive from Saul's family? If so, I want to show you who is kindness to them." Ziba replied, "Yes, one of Jonathan's sons is still alive. He is crippled in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. "In Lodabar," Ziba told him, "at the home of Machir, son of Ammiel." So David sent for him and brought him from Machir's home. His name was Mephibosheth. He was Jonathan's son and Saul's grandson. When he came to David, he bowed low to the ground in deep respect. David said, "Greetings, Mephibosheth." Mephibosheth replied, "I am your servant." "Don't be afraid," David said. "I intend to show kindness to you because of my promise to your father, Jonathan. I will give you all the property that once belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will eat here with me at the king's table." Mephibosheth bowed respectfully and exclaimed, "Who is your servant Who is your servant that you should show such kindness to a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Saul's servant Ziba and said, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and servants are to farm the land for him to produce food for your master's household. But Mephibosheth, your master's grandson, will eat here at my table." Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Ziba replied, "Yes, my lord the king, I am your servant, and I will do all that you have commanded." And from that time on, Mephibosheth ate regularly at David's table like one of the king's own sons. Mephibosheth had a young son named Micah. From then on, all the members of Ziba's household were Mephibosheth's servants. And Mephibosheth, who was crippled in both feet, lived in Jerusalem and ate regularly at the king's table. All right, beautiful people. Let's go ahead and go on over here to the Legends of the Jews, Joel and Shalom. All right, y'all. So we start in Volume 4, and this is Chapter 9, The Later Kings of Judah. Guys, we're going to be done with this real soon. Ooh. But before we end, y'all know we got to read about Daniel and Ezekiel. Oh, it's been so good. Baruch, the sons of Moses. Okay, y'all. Chapter 9, page 459, and it's starting with Joash. Okay. When the prophet Jonah, doing the behest of his master Elisha, anointed Jehu king over Israel, he poured the oil out of a pitcher, not out of a horn, to indicate that the dynasty of Jehu would not occupy the throne long. At first, Jehu, thought somewhat a foolish king, was at least pious, but he abandoned his God-fearing ways from the moment he saw the document bearing the signature of the prophet Ahijah of Shiloh, which bound the signers to pay implicit obedience to Jeroboam. The king took this as evidence that the prophet had approved the worship of the golden calves. So it came to pass that Jehu, the destroyer of Baal worship, did nothing to oppose the idolatrous service established by Jeroboam at Bethel. The successors of Jehu were not better. On the contrary, they were worse. And therefore, in the 5th generation, an end was put to the dynasty of Jehu by the hand of the assassin. The kings of Judah differed in no essential particular from their colleagues in the north. Ahaziah, whom Jehu killed, was a shameless sinner. He had the name of Yahuah expurged from every passage in which it occurred in the Holy Scriptures, and the names of idols inserted in its place. We still see that, right? They did all that through the Bible. Matter of fact, they tell you in the preface. That's what they did. We have removed the names of the living God and replaced them with general terms like God and Lord, right? Upon the death of Ahaziah followed the reign of terror under the queen Athaliah. When Yahuah exacted payment from the house of David for his trespass in connection with the extermination of the priest at Nob. Hold on. I read it the wrong way. Upon the death of Ahaziah followed the reign of terror under the queen Athaliah. When Yahuah exacted payment from the house of David for his trespass in connection with the extermination of the priests at Nob. As Abiathar had been the only male descendant of Abimelech to survive the persecution of Saul, so the sole representative of the house of David to remain after the sword of Athaliah had raged was Joash, the child kept in hiding in the Holy of Holies in the temple by the high priest Jehoiada and his wife Jehoshaphat. Later, Jehoiada vindicated the right of Joash upon the throne and installed him as king of Judah. The very crown worn by the rulers of the house of David testified to the legitimacy of the young prince, for it possessed the peculiarity of fitting none but the rightful successors of David. At the instigation of Jehoiada, King Joash undertook the restoration of the temple. The work was completed so expeditiously that one living at the time the temple was erected by Solomon was permitted to see the new structure shortly before his death. This good fortune befell Jehoiada himself, the son of Benaiah, commander-in-chief in the army under Solomon. So as Joash continued under the tutelage of Jehoiada, he was a pious king. When Jehoiada departed this life, the courtiers came to Joash and flattered him. If thou wert not a god, thou hast not been able to abide for 6 years in the Holy of Holies, a spot in which even the high priest is permitted to enter but once a year. The king lent ear to their blandishments and permitted the people to pay him divine homage. Ooh, flattery will get you every time, won't it? Stay away from it. If you're really good at something, your prayer should probably be, Father, keep me humble. Teach me how to, because people are appreciative of things you do, but you have to learn how to kind of deflect some of those things without being ignorant and rude and dishonoring to those who want to pay honor to you for your gifts. But you gotta find a balance there where you don't become puffed up and full of pride, right? Sometimes they can be a little challenging, right? You don't want to get the big head like everybody else is beneath me or beneath my knowledge. That's why it says knowledge puffs up, right? And that's something that I read all the time. I'm like, Father, keep me humble before you in all things, because knowledge puffs up. But I do want you to give me knowledge, but I don't want to be puffed up. I said, teach me how to be like Abraham or like Daniel, who you gave all this to, and they were completely submitted to you, and they didn't use what they knew against other people, right? Everybody has to go through that. Some people pass it, some people don't. I pray that I'm one who passes it, right? Okay. Let's go back to what they said. So long as Joash continued under the tutelage of Jehoiada, he was a pious king. When Jehoiada departed this life, the courtiers, or the servants of the court, came to Joash and flattered him. If thou were not a god, telling him, we think you a god, my dude, you a god. Because if thou were not a god, thou hast not been able to abide for 6 years in the Holy of Holies, a spot which even the high priest is permitted to enter but once a year. He can only enter, he was authorized to enter once a year, but you got to live there 6 years. You definitely got to be a god, right? The courtiers came to Joash and flattered him. If thou were not a god, thou hast not been able to abide for 6 years in the Holy of Holies, a spot even which the high priest is permitted to enter but once a year. The king lent ear to their blandishments and permitted the people to pay him divine homage. But when the folly of the king went to the extreme of promoting him to set up an idol in the temple, Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada, placed himself at the entrance and, barring the way, said, Thou shalt not do it so as long as I live. High priest, prophet, and judge, though Zechariah was, and son-in-law of Joash to boot, the king still did not shrink from having him killed from his presumptuous words. Nor was he deterred by the fact that it happened on a day of atonement, which fell on the Sabbath. The innocent blood crimsoning the hall of the priest did not remain unavenged. For 252 years, it did not leave off seething and pulsating until finally Nebuzaradan, captain of Nebuchadnezzar's guard, ordered a great carnage among the Judeans to avenge the death of Zechariah. This is Zechariah, the prophet, my G. Joash himself, the murderer of Zechariah, met with an evil end. He fell into the hands of the Syrians, and they abused him in their barbarous, immoral way. Before he could recover from the suffering inflicted upon him, his servants slew him. Amaziah, the son and successor of Joash, in many respects resembled his father. At the beginning of his reign, he was God-fearing, but when, through the aid of Yahuah, he had gained a brilliant victory over the Edomites, he knew no better way of manifesting his gratitude than to establish in Jerusalem the cult of the idol worshipped by his conquered enemies. To compass his chastisement, Yahuah inspired Amaziah with the idea of provoking a war with Joash, the ruler of the northern kingdom. Amaziah demanded that Joash should neither recognize the suzerainty of the southern realm voluntarily or let the fate of battle decide the question. At first, Joash sought to turn Amaziah aside from his purpose by a parable reminding him of the fate of Shechem, which the sons of Jacob had visited upon him for having done violence to their sister Dinah. Amaziah refused to be warned. He persisted in his challenge, and war ensued. The fortune of the battle decided against Amaziah. Look, and didn't it just say that Yahuah enticed Amaziah to go on and do this? It was Yahuah. So he truly did hear from Yah, but Yah was bringing him to his end, right? Which was death. You gotta be careful about this, right? And when it's Yahuah leading you to your death at this point, it's because you ignored him the many times before he tried to turn you around. And because, think about it, that's why we're in captivity. Think about it, it's the same principle, right? And so some people say, oh, I truly have heard from Yah, and this is what he said, and we're going to be doing this, right? But let's look back a little bit further. We need to know everything that happened. Okay, so did it come a point in time where it seemed that Yahuah changed his mind on you? Well, first he was telling you no, and now he's telling you yes. Because a lot of time when that happened, that means you have ignored the no's and you persisted on. And what happens? To those headed to captivity, to captivity. Those headed for the sword, to the sword. Those headed to the dungeon you shall go. I'm going to help you get there, right? That's what happened. Let's read it again. Listen. Amaziah, the son and successor of Joash, in many respects resembled his father. At the beginning of his reign, he was God-fearing. But when, through the aid of God, through the aid of Yahuah, he started off good. At the beginning of his reign, he was God-fearing. But when, through the aid of Yahuah, he had gained a brilliant victory over the Edomites, he knew no better way of manifesting his gratitude than to establish in Jerusalem the cult of the idol worshipped by his conquered enemies. First thing, right? The very God who helped you get the victory, now you go up and break the very first command, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Now you go set up an idol, right? To accomplish his chastisement, Yahuah inspired Amaziah. So, you want to set up an idol? Okay, I'm going to help you get to your desired end. Yahuah inspired Amaziah with the idea of provoking a war with Joash, the ruler of the northern kingdom. Amaziah demanded that Joash should neither recognize the suzerainty of the southern realm voluntarily or let the fate of battle decide the question. At first, Joash sought to turn Amaziah aside from his purpose by a parable reminding him of the fate of Shechem, which the sons of Jacob had visited upon him for having done violence to their sister Dinah. So even the person you're about to go to war with is also trying to warn you. Don't do this. Go on back home so y'all can live safely. But he kept driving on, right? And Yahuah was helping him drive along, not realizing it was to his own death. Amaziah refused to be warned. He persisted in his challenge, and a war ensued. The fortune of battle decided against Amaziah. He suffered defeat, and later he was tortured to death by his own subjects. 3 great prophets is the next section, page 460. The reign of Uzziah, who for a little while occupied the throne during his father Amaziah's lifetime, is notable particularly because it marks the beginning of the activity of the 3 prophets, Hosea, Amos, and Isaiah. The oldest of the 3 was Hosea, the son of the prophet and prince Beri, the Beri who later was carried away captive to Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria. Of Beri's prophecies, we have but 2 verses preserved for us by Isaiah. The peculiar marriage contracted by Hosea at the command of Yahuah himself was not without good reason. When Yahuah spoke to the prophet about the sins of Israel, expecting him to defend or excuse his people, Hosea said severely, O Lord of the world, thine is the universe. In place of Israel, choose another as thy peculiar people from among the nations of the earth. To make the true relation between Yahuah and Israel known to the prophet, he was commanded to take a wife, a woman with a dubious past. So we know about Hosea, right? Yahuah told Hosea, I want you to go marry that prostitute over there. After she had bore him several children, Yahuah suddenly put the question to him, why followest thou not the example of thy teacher Moses, who denied himself the joys of family life after his call to prophecy? Hosea replied, I can neither send my wife away nor divorce her, for she has borne me children. If now, said Yahuah to him, thou who hast a wife, of whose honesty thou art so uncertain that thou canst not even be sure that her children are thine. He said, hold up. First of all, you're being faithful to a woman who you really don't know if those children belong to you. Look, hold on. Let me go back and read it. After she had borne him several children, Yahuah suddenly put the question to him, Why followest thou not the example of thy teacher Moses, who denied himself the joys of family after his call to prophecy? Hosea replied, I can neither send my wife away nor divorce her, for she has borne me children. If now, said Yahuah to him, thou who hast a wife, of whose honesty thou art so uncertain that thou cannot even be sure that her children are thine, and yet thou canst not separate from her, how then can I separate myself from Israel, my children, the children of my elect, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? He said, look, if you can't even separate yourself from the woman whose children you are not really sure belong to you, how then could I separate myself from my people Israel, who I know of a certain belong to my servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? How then can I separate myself from Israel, from my children, the children of my elect, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Hosea entreated Yahuah to pardon him, but Yahuah said, better were it that thou should pray for the welfare of Israel, for thou art the cause that I issued 3 fateful decrees against them. Hosea prayed as he was bidden, and his prayer averted the impending 3-fold doom. Hosea died at Babylon at a time in which a journey thence to Palestine was beset with many perils. Desirous of having his earthly remains rest in sacred ground, he requested before his death that his bier be loaded upon a camel, excuse me, and the animal permitted to make its way as it would. Wherever it stopped, there his body was to be buried. As he commanded, so it was done. Without a single mishap, the camel arrived at Safed, the Hebrew cemetery of the town. In the Hebrew cemetery of the town, it stood still, and there Hosea was buried in the presence of a large concourse. The prophetical activity of Amos commenced after Hosea's had closed and before Isaiah's began. Though he had an impediment in his speech, he obeyed the call of Yahuah, and he betook himself to Bethel to proclaim to the sinful inhabitants thereof the divine message with he had been charged. The denunciation of the priest Amaziah of Bethel, who informed against the prophet before King Jeroboam of Israel, did him no harm, for the king, idolater though he was, For the king, idolater though he was, entertained profound respect for Amos. He said to himself, God forbid I should think the prophet guilty of cherishing traitorous plans, and if he were, it would surely be at the bidding of Yahuah. For this pious disposition, Jeroboam was rewarded. Never had the northern kingdom attained to such power as under him. However, the fearlessness of Amos finally caused his death. King Uzziah inflicted a mortal blow upon his forehead with a red-hot iron. 2 years after Amos ceased to prophesy, Isaiah was favored with his first divine communication. It was the day on which King Uzziah, blinded by success and prosperity, arrogated to himself the privileges of the priesthood. How you make your own self a priest? He tried to offer sacrifices upon the altar, and when the high priest Azariah ventured to restrain him, he threatened to slay him and any priest sympathizing with him unless they kept silent. Suddenly, the earth quaked so violently that a great breach was torn in the temple, through which a brilliant ray of sunlight pierced, falling upon the forehead of the king and causing leprosy to break forth upon him. Ain't that what Yahuah said? What happened? Remember what happened to Aaron's 2 sons? You can't do this. The immediate punishment for this is leprosy to the day you die, right? Okay. What's wrong, Tootie?
Okay, go get some. Oh yeah, you gotta put some. Go get the Vaseline from upstairs at my bathroom. Put some up there.
She skinned her knee outside playing the other day.
Go ahead. You need to moisturize it too, but you can't get it. You can't get up here crying. Okay.
1 second, people. Just 1 second. Come on, you can't hop up here because you're not fully dressed for me. 1 second, y'all. Come here. Go upstairs. Come on. 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 All right, y'all. Tootie, go get it. Okay.
Suddenly, the earth quaked so violently that a great breach was torn in the temple, through which a brilliant ray of sunlight pierced, falling upon the forehead of the king and causing leprosy to break forth upon him. Nor was all the damage done by the earthquake. On the west side of Jerusalem, half of the mountain was split off and hurled to the east into a road at the distance of 4 stadia. And not heaven and earth alone were outraged by Uzziah's atrocity and sought to annihilate him. Even the angels of fire, the seraphim, were on the point of descending and consuming him when a voice from on high proclaimed that the punishment appointed for Uzziah was unlike that meted out to Korah and his company, despite the similarity of their crimes. When Isaiah beheld the august throne of Yahuah on this memorable day, he was sorely affrighted. For he reproached himself without having tried to turn the king away from his impious desire. Remember King Uzziah? And Isaiah said, I saw Yahuah seated upon his throne. This is what was going on right here, right? But I think that I want to say that was Isaiah chapter 6 or it's chapter 1. It was 6 or 1. 1 or 6. 1 comes first. Okay. When Isaiah beheld the august throne of Yahuah on this memorable day, he was sorely affrighted, for he reproached himself with not having tried to turn the king away from his impious desire. Enthralled, he hearkened to the hymns of praise sung by the angels, and lost in admiration, he failed to join his voice with theirs. Woe is me, he cried out, that I was silent. Woe is me that I did not join the chorus of angels praising Yahuah. Had I done it, I too, like the angels, would have become immortal, seeing that I was permitted to look upon the sights and behold, which had brought death to the other men. Then he began to excuse himself. I am a man of unclean lips. What if they had to put all of this in here, not just cherry picked and left in certain pieces, right? So we could see the full thing of what was going on at Uzziah's throne, right? When he saw Yahuah high and lifted up. Oh, woe is me, I am a man of unclean lips. But we did not understand the full story because they didn't canonize the full story. Like I said, we got a cherry-picked version. Then he began to excuse himself. I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. At once resounded the voice of Yahuah in rebuke. Of thyself thou art the master, and of thyself thou may sayest what thou choosest. But who gave thee the right to calumniate my children of Israel and call them a people of unclean lips? Here's something else we notice that Yahuah always gets on people about, right? He said, look, it's like I can beat my kids, but you can't beat my kids, right? Don't you dare lift your hand against them. It's that same principle we see, right? Even with Moses, right? Same thing here with Isaiah. He said, I am a man of unclean lips, and I come from a people of unclean lips. Talking about Yahuah people and his churn, right? He said, wait a minute, Isaiah. Although Isaiah, he was telling the truth, but Yahuah was teaching him a principle. Like, do not ever talk about my children. You don't want to go to blows with me, right? Look, let's just go back. Hold on. Enthralled, He hearkened to the hymns of the praise sung by the angels, and lost in admiration, he failed to join his voice with theirs. Woe is me, he cried out, that I was silent. Woe is me that I did not join the chorus of the angels praising Yahuah. Had I done it, I too, like the angels, would have become immortal, seeing I was permitted to look upon the sights, to behold, which had brought death to other men. Then he began to excuse himself. I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of people of unclean lips. At once resounded the voice of Yahuah in rebuke. Of thyself thou art the master, and of thyself thou may sayest what thou choosest. He said, you the master of yourself, and you can say about yourself whatever you want to say about yourself. Of thyself thou art the master, and of thyself thou mayest say what thou choosest. But who gave thee the right to calumniate my children of Israel and call them a people of unclean lips? Oops. And Isaiah heard Yahuah bid one of the seraphim touch his lips with a live coal as a punishment for having slandered Israel. Though the coal was so hot that the seraph needed tongs to hold the tongs with which he had taken coal from the altar, the prophet yet escaped unscathed, but he learned the lesson that it was his duty to defend Israel and not traduce him. And may Yahuah forgive us all. Look. I just got convicted real quick. Maybe that's why I had that. Oh, Father, forgive me. Look. I ain't gonna make no excuses for myself, because I see that's what I was about to do this morning. Although people kind of go astray, then they do stuff and they start off good. Like, I just really felt that all down in my shot now, y'all. That was from me. Look. Oh, I feel it right in my chest. Hold on. Look. Oh, Lord have mercy. I'm going to go back and read that again for myself, y'all. Look. Okay. When Isaiah beheld the august throne of Yahuah on this memorable day, he was sorely affrighted, for he reproached himself with not having tried to turn the king away from his impious desire. Enthralled, he hearkened to the hymns of the praise sung by the angels, and lost in admiration, he failed to join his voice with theirs. Woe is me, he cried out, that I was silent. Woe is me that I did not join the chorus of the angels praising Yahuah. Had I done it, I too, like the angels, would have become immortal, seeing that I was permitted to look upon the sights to behold, which had brought death to other men. Then he began to excuse himself. I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of people of unclean lips. At once resounded the voice of Yahuah in rebuke. Of thyself thou art the master, and of thyself thou may sayest what thou choosest. But who gave thee the right to calumniate my children of Israel and call them a people of unclean lips? And Isaiah heard Yahuah bid one of the seraphim to touch his lips with a live coal as a punishment for having slandered Israel. Though the coal was so hot that the seraph needed tongs to hold the tongs with which he had taken the coal from the altar, the prophet yet escaped unscathed, but he learned the lesson that it was his duty to defend Israel, not traduce him. Y'all got it. Y'all better go ahead and highlight that just like me. If I had my highlight, I would highlight it, but I got a pen, so I'm underlining it and putting stars and drawing a big circle around it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Thenceforth, the championship of his people was the mainspring of the prophet's activity, and he was rewarded by having more revelations concerning Israel than the other nations vouched. Hold on. I was reading this too fast. Thenceforth, the championship of his people was the mainspring of the prophet's activity, and he was rewarded by having more revelations concerning Israel and the other nations vouchsafed him than any other prophet before or after him. Moreover, Yahuah designated Isaiah to be the prophet of consolation. Thus it happened that the very Isaiah, whose early prophecies foretold the exile and the destruction of the temple, later described and proclaimed in plainer terms than any other prophet the brilliant destiny in store for Israel. Next section, the two kingdoms chastised. Afflicted with leprosy, Uzziah was unfit to reign as king, and Jotham administered the affairs of Judah for 25 years before the death of his father. Jotham possessed so much piety that his virtues added to those of two of the very pious men. Jotham possessed so much piety that his virtues added to those of two of the very pious men suffice to atone for all the sins of the whole of mankind committed from the hour of creation unto the end of all time. Ahaz, the son of Jotham, was very unlike him. From first to last, he was a sinner. He abolished the true worship of Yahuah. He forbade the study of the Torah and set up an idol in the upper room of the temple and disregarded the Hebrew laws of marriage. His transgressions are the less pardonable because he sinned against Yahuah, knowing his grandeur and power, as appears from his reply to the prophet. Isaiah said to him, "Ask a sign of Yahuah, as for instance, that the dead should arise. Korah came up from Sheol, or Elijah descend from heaven." The king's answer was, "I know that thou hast the power to do any of these, but I do not wish the name of Yahuah to be glorified through me." The only good quality possessed by Ahaz was respect for Isaiah. To avoid his reproaches, Ahaz would disguise himself when he went abroad so that the prophet might not recognize him. Only to this circumstance, joined to the fact that he was the father of a pious son and the son of an equally pious father, it is to be ascribed that in spite of his wickedness, Ahaz is not one of those who have forfeited their portion in the world to come. But he did not escape punishment. On the contrary, his chastisement was severe, not only as king, but also as man. In the ill-starred war against Pekah, the king of the northern kingdom, he lost his firstborn son, a great hero. Pekah, however, was not permitted to enjoy the fruits of his victory, for the king of Assyria invaded his empire, captured the golden calf at Dan, and led the tribes on the east side of the Jordan away into exile. The disbursement of the Israelitish kingdom went on a space for some years. Then the Assyrians, in the reign of Hosea, carried off the second golden calf together with the tribes of Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, and Naphtali, leaving but 1/8 of the Israelites in their own land. The larger portion of the exiles was taken to Damascus. After that, Israel's doom overtook it with giant strides. And the last ruler of Israel actually hastened the end of his kingdom by a pious deed. After the golden calves were removed by the Assyrians, Hosea, the king of the north, abolished the institution of stationing the guards on the frontier between Judah and Israel to prevent pilgrimages to Jerusalem. But the people made no use of the liberty granted them. They persisted in their idolatrous cult, and this quickened their punishment. So long as their kings had put obstacles in their path, they could excuse themselves before Yahuah for not worshiping him in the true way. The action taken by their king, Hosea, left them no defense. When the Assyrians made their third incursion into Israel, the kingdom of the north was destroyed forever, and the people, one and all, were carried away into exile. The heathen nations settled in Samaria by the Assyrians instead of the deported 10 tribes were forced by Yahuah to accept the true religion of the Jews. Nevertheless, they continued to worship their golden idols, and the Babylonians paid devotion to a hen. The people of Cuthan took to a cock, those of Hamath to a ram. The dog and the ass were the gods of the Avites, and the mule and the horse were the gods of the Sepharvites. Oh, yeah. I probably should wait for Hezekiah. We're going to stop right here because we're at 57 minutes. And these next 2 sections about Hezekiah, I don't want to start with Hezekiah and then have to pause and not read the miracles wrought for Hezekiah. So we'll pause right here because these next few sections are about him. So we'll cut it clean right here today, because that's probably all what we read tomorrow. These 3 sections: Hezekiah, the miracles wrought for Hezekiah, and also Manasseh, right? And we'll read that because it mentions Hezekiah. Yep, so those 3 sections we'll read tomorrow. So we'll stop right here. Beautiful people. So I hope y'all enjoyed the reading for the day. For today, we start on page 458, and we pause on page 461. We read 2 Samuel 7, 8, and 9. Guys, it is Friday. Ooh. We ain't going to be here tomorrow. We ain't going to be here tomorrow, y'all. Because it's the last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And it's a Sabbath. I'm actually not going to see y'all till Monday. Oh, so y'all can read ahead. Y'all can read ahead. Look. Well, I'll see y'all Monday. But go ahead and read ahead. If not, y'all can wait till we show back up. Y'all willing, right? Okay. So it is Friday, April the 2nd, 2021, day 118 of year 3 of reading through the books of the law and the prophets, and of the 3-year consecutive day count, day 787. All right, y'all. So let's go ahead and do the blessing really quick. This came late. I'm sorry. Said somebody was at my front door. It is a package. Amazon came, but I saw them pull away. That message is delayed for some reason. You say you thought that was Saturday. Wait. Yeah, tomorrow's Saturday, right? Jolie, what's going on, brother? Good morning. You're welcome. Yeah, Saturday. Let me pull up here this the blessing, y'all. The blessing, remember, is found in Numbers chapter 6, starting at verse 22, ending at the end of the chapter, verse 27. Remember, the first 21 verses is the Nazirite vow. A man or woman can take the vow if you should choose to do so. It's not a vow to be taken lightly. You really should think about it, right? Because you are giving a vow, and you should be faithful to your vows to Yahuah, right? And Yahuah spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto Aaron and unto his sons, saying, On this wise ye shall bless the children of Israel, saying unto them, May Yahuah bless us and keep us. May Yahuah make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. May Yahuah lift up his countenance upon us and give us peace. And they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Uncle JB, shalom. Okay. Blessings. I thought the Sabbath is Sunday. The Sabbath is Sunday. The last day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread is Saturday. So it's like you got 2 Sabbaths in a row. Remember when it started? It started on the Sabbath on Sunday. That was the first day, right? And so the 7th day. Let's go back. Saturday was the 14th day of the month. I know you gotta, sometimes the dates be throwing you off and I gotta go back and double check myself. That's why you gotta write it down just to kind of keep track of everything, right? So Passover was the 27th. The very next day, which is the 15th day of the month, begins the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which tells us it's a Sabbath, right? but it's actually also a true Sabbath for that moon cycle, right? So it fell on Sunday. So the Sabbath for this moon cycle is on Sunday, but the end of this feast ends Saturday, tomorrow. So it's the 7th day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we go right into Sunday, which is the Sabbath for this moon cycle. So yes, you're right. Blessings. Sabbath is Sunday, but the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the 7th day, is Saturday. So we got 2 in a row. And I didn't think about that until this morning when I looked at it. I'm like, oh, shoot. So, but yeah, so we won't be back here until Monday. So, guys, enjoy the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the last day. If you haven't made any since the first day, make another batch of it. Make another little piece, right? It's the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay. So you should be eating unleavened bread and I guess going over the accounts of what happened during the first Exodus. That's normally what's done. You just kind of not relive, but you read through the accounts of what happened and why this feast is in place and why it's a memorial feast. It's just to remember the mighty hand of Yahuah and how he delivered his people. So every year there's a memorial feast set up. We just kind of walk through it and see. You know, keep your faith built up, and if you learn the principles behind it, you can see them operating in everyday life. And when you know something, you can act on it purposely, right? And you can begin to pull those principles into your life and see them operate, right? But we'll start at the elementary level and we'll graduate as we learn the stories. Just learn them as the stories, right? Before we go and try and pull principles out, we got to be familiar with the story. When we're familiar with the story, now we can remember the story. We can, if somebody say something about it, oh yeah, so that's found there. No, this is what happened. When we pull in the missing pieces of the puzzle, now we have a bigger picture of what's going on, right? Now, once we have the bigger picture of the story that's being told, now you may begin to notice spiritual principles underlying in the story, right? And once you begin to recognize those underlying spiritual principles, you can begin to see them little by little begin to operate in the world where you currently live today, right? When you begin to recognize those things, like I said, you can begin to on purpose act on them and on purpose use them to bring results into your life, right? But you got to grow to get there, people. Right? And I didn't even realize that. I was just reading through the understand to get the story right. I did not realize all these things would begin to happen just by me just understanding the story. And now that I begin to understand the story and have the missing pieces, I begin to ask questions. Wait a minute. So wait a minute. And as I begin to ask questions, it caused me to go looking for other things and begin to uncover other things. And now I'm like, wait a minute. I done seen that happen. It wasn't this, but I seen that. Hold on. I remember this thing that happened in my life. That same thing kind of happened, but in a different way. But it still happened just like that, right? So that's how you kind of begin to grow and understand and recognize principles that you see told through stories and parables, how you can recognize them in the real life where you live and walk today, right? And that's how we become successful, by reading through these stories and meditating upon them, being able to pull the principles out and take them. And as you grow, you no longer need stories, right? You remember the stories because they are teachers. The stories are our teachers. But when you grow up, you no longer need milk. Now you can eat meat because now you have teeth. When you have teeth in your mouth, it's a telltale sign that you should be eating meat. If you have teeth in your mouth and you're not eating meat, because I don't eat real meat for real, right? Because vegan. But you get the principle behind it, right? You can't feed a baby meat, right? A baby has to have milk. But the point is growth, right? And as you grow, your perception should grow and your understanding should grow. And you should no longer think like a child where you need stories to help you along in your growth. We can now just give you principles and you can operate on them, right? Okay, so it's a growth. Yes, Shayla, it is Sunday. The last day of unleavened bread is Saturday. Yes, the moon cycle Sabbath is Sunday for this moon cycle. So we got 2 ending this feast, right? So the first day of unleavened bread, which is true indeed a Sabbath day, falls on the true Sabbath day for this moon cycle, right? So when we started, Feast of Unleavened Bread is the Sabbath, and it fell on the Sabbath day. The last day, which is the 7th day of the feast, falls on Saturday, and then the next day is the moon cycle Sabbath, right? So you got 2 Sabbath, 2 days of rest in a row, right? Okay. All right, so that's it, y'all. I don't think I see any more questions today. Okay, there's a comment from earlier. I said something about that already. Okay. All right, everybody. Love y'all. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here and get about our day. I'll be talking to some of y'all throughout the day anyway. But anyway, y'all willing, I'll see everybody back here Monday morning, 7:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It will be April the 5th. All right, 2021. Love y'all.